really comes into play, doesn't it, tonight? And of course, fascinating that it's the only opportunity that we get to see David Cameron and Ed Miliband head-to-head.
This is the one moment in the campaign, as you say, when all the party leaders have to face each other. So it is a unique moment in the campaign, and that's why it matters. But it matters, Anita, for another reason, in that today has something which all political leaders dread and their aides always try to avoid, and that is the unknown, the uncertain, the unpredictable. Because the way the debate has been structured, yes, there will be the very carefully controlled 1 minute answer to the questions where the leaders get to speak for 1 minute uninterrupted. But after they've each had their turn, there is then up to 18 minutes of basically free-for-all, where all 7 leaders can interrupt, interject, get over their points. And that creates a completely unknown element where anything could happen. And that might, just might, provide one of those very rare election moments which could potentially shape this campaign. But my colleague Ross Hawkins has been taking a look inside the debate hall. Here's what he found.
Don't tell anyone. We've sneaked onto ITV's set. I think they think we work for them, so keep quiet about it. We'll get away with it. And just look at how close they are. This is where David Cameron is going to stand for that debate. You can almost feel the anxiety now. Look how close these podiums are. He'll be here with Nicola Sturgeon. But, if he wants to have a row with Ed Miliband, he is all the way over there at the red podium. And I'm told there's nothing in the election rules that have been drawn up between them for these debates that are going to stop those two having the argument. And I'll tell you something, I know for a fact Ed Miliband wants to have one. This is where the moderator's going to stand, and then just get a sense over here. This isn't a huge studio, it's a pretty small one. It's going to feel intimate, it's going to feel pretty scary. You can see the clock up there, that will tell them how much longer they've got to go. They've got a minute at the start of each of their answers. They'll be taking some questions from the audience here. It's all pretty laid out, but the final word, because of the way this arrangement's been set up, it was decided by chance by drawing lots, will fall to David Cameron. That is a pretty big advantage to have. Some of the smaller parties will think they will never get a chance like this again. The Greens over there, Natalie, Bennett, will be hoping they'll get a chance to speak to millions more people than they have done before. This could be a really significant moment. This is the place. It happens this evening.
Interesting what Ross saying there, because you sense the stakes are to some extent loaded against David Cameron and Ed Miliband. How so? Because they are the two would-be prime ministers, so they have to retain that level of authority. They cannot afford to be sucked down into an ugly scramble. And also because for them, they really have to make sure their authority, their standing is not dented. So for them, it is a much riskier moment than perhaps for the other 5 leaders. The other thing which strikes me, which viewers may take away from tonight, is it is almost a visible symbol that we have now entered another political era. We are no longer in the era of 2-party politics. Very obviously, we have 7 party leaders, and that seems to me almost a sort of symbolic moment where everyone can see we have entered a multi-party era. Now, we know some of the areas which some of the leaders want to get over tonight. We know, for example, that Nicola Sturgeon is keen to tackle Ed Miliband over austerity. And we also know that Nigel Farage wants to tackle David Cameron over immigration. And this morning, he was on Radio 4's Today programme and he was being pressed again about his party's approach to immigration. And they have previously got into a bit of a tangle over whether they favour a cap on migration. Well, this morning, Mr Farage said, no, they didn't want a cap on net migration, but they did want a cap on the numbers coming into Britain. This is what he said.
You can cap the number of people coming, but what you can't do is put a cap on net migration, because that is mathematically impossible.
What is your cap on people coming then? Do that part, because you've accepted that's possible. What is your cap on people coming in?
Well, it is below 50,000 a year, all right? It is below 50,000 a year. Simple as that. But this whole debate, we've been tied up with caps for 5 years. It has devalued the debate. What we're not actually addressing is the fact that 624,000 people settled in Britain last year, and that we have no control over the numbers that settle this year or next year. And we're not having... I mean, let's be honest. We cannot have any debate about immigration, about numbers, all the while we're members of the European Union. And that, I hope, is what's going to get discussed tonight.
Mr Farage also said that he would be prepared for Britain to be worse off if that meant they could have lower immigration, because it was put to him that immigrants coming into Britain boosted the British economy. He said, well, that may be, but if that means the population rising up to potentially 75 million, then he would be prepared for people to be worse off. One other thing worth looking at tonight, Anita, I think, is the body language. It's going to be a fascinating moment just to see the 7 leaders all lined up, and you're wondering how their podium positions will actually impact on their performance, because we have the contrast whereby Ed Miliband is slap bang in the middle, but that means he has to look that way and then he has to look that way. So he kind of has people going at him on either side, whereas David Cameron is on the far right, the extreme right of the podium, which means he's going like this the whole time. But does that mean he's out of the debate? Is he sidelined? So it's a fascinating moment, not just in terms of the arguments, in terms of the occasion, but also just in terms of the theatre and the body language of the debate.